Good morning and welcome to Grace St. Luke's Church. My name is Ollie Rencher, and I'm happy to see that we are gathering for the first time in 2021 for the Sunday Morning Parish Hall Forum. And our guest today is the Reverend Katherine Bush. We have a few people gathered with us here in Tresvant Hall, but so many of you have indicated you would be joining us online in various ways, so we welcome you today. Whenever you have a chance, you will see a publication that looks like this, and it is the most recent messenger, and it's also Life at Grace St. Luke's, and it's various speakers who will be with us and programs that are taking place. And as I mentioned today, Reverend Katherine Bush, and next week we have Russ Wigington, who's the president of the National Civil Rights Museum, and there's so much more that's taking place on Sunday mornings in Life at Grace St. Luke's. Katherine is no stranger to this parish, and she has offered a sermon at the 8:30 service and will be back at 10:30, but now we welcome her at 9:30. Welcome, Katherine.
Good morning. Good morning to those of you in the room and to those of you in your own rooms, wherever you are today. I am going to start us off by reading this morning's collect. It's the collect appointed for this Sunday. And I'm preaching on something else entirely, but this class is kind of like an extended reflection on the collect. So if you'll join me in prayer. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Grant us, Lord, not to be anxious about earthly things, but to love things heavenly. And even now, while we are placed among things that are passing away, to hold fast to those that shall endure. Through Jesus Christ our Lord, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
I have gathered some poems for us today. I believe they are available in links and things for those of you who are wherever you are. And but I'll be reading the poems along out loud as well, so that we can all participate in this. This idea that's present in the collect about things that are passing away and figuring out what to hold on to in an unsteady world has inspired a lot of what I want to share with you today. I've loosely titled things Poems for Steady and Unsteady Times, which is forever, which is always. It's always a little steady and always a little unsteady. So this works this Sunday. It would probably work just as well next Sunday, next year, last year. There's a sense of where we're always in this place. This feels steady, secure, reliable. This feels shaky and tenuous. So wherever you are on the continuum, I hope that these offer something to you. You all know by now, if you attended a Sunday school class with me, that poetry is my go-to. It's kind of my one-trick offering. I wanted to offer a few words from someone else about why that is. Ada Limon is a contemporary poet. She is about to take over hosting a podcast called The Slowdown, which I highly recommend. It's a morning poem. It's very brief. It's low commitment. It used to be hosted by Tracy K. Smith, and she stepped back from those duties, and I was crushed. So I'm thrilled to say that it's coming back this week with Ada Limon as host. But she, in her introduction, she says this. This is what poetry does. It offers no advice, no breaking news, no wisdom, no, and the moral of the story is, instead, it offers connection and reciprocity, the inner and outer world colliding for one brief instant, so that it's not about having answers, being right or wrong, but recommitting ourselves again to the mystery, silence, and awe of the world. I think that last bit is also a good description of church on a good day, recommitting ourselves to the mystery, silence, and the awe of the world. So I offer you that as we begin to think about why would poetry speak to us in steady and unsteady times? What does poetry have to say? Maybe not so much breaking news, maybe not even wisdom, but a connection. Something for us to sit with and know that we're not alone. The first poem that I want to offer is a poem by William Stafford. William Stafford died in the 90s. He was writing mostly through the kind of core center of the 20th century. He described himself as a poet and a pacifist. And I offer you his poem, The Way It Is. The Way It Is. There is a thread you follow. It goes among things that change. But it doesn't change. People wonder about what you are pursuing. You have to explain about the thread, but it's hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. This poem has been a bit of a thread for me. Some of you may be aware I'm in the midst of some transition and changing jobs, and there's been a lot of things kind of steady and unsteady in our home life and things. And the idea that there is a thread out there is a tremendous comfort to me. And I appreciate the idea that he says that the threads are small though, right? They're really thin, and it may be hard to find, and it may be hard for someone else to see yours and to understand what it is that's holding you together. It may be hard for you sometimes to say, what is it that's holding me together? And I wonder if you would sit for just a moment and think about what your thread is. Or perhaps what your threads, plural, are, although I'd limit you to just a few. What are you following? What doesn't change amidst the things that do change? What do you have to explain to others about? What do you hold on to? Knowing that while you hold on to it, you can't get lost. We may have some shared answers, we may have some disparate, different answers. I appreciate too, there's a story kind of in the colloquial sense of a story that many people have told, a fable of sorts. I heard it from Parker Palmer in his writing. In the Midwest, on a farm, you would tie a rope from your back door to the barn. This is life that I'm unfamiliar with. I do not have a barn, nor does it ever snow in Memphis, except for last February's freak, amazing snowstorm. But you tied a rope from your back door to the barn so that you could get to the barn and get back and not get lost in your own backyard. Because it's easy to get lost. It's easy to get lost even in the most familiar places, even in your own home. So figuring out what is the thread, what is the rope, what are you hanging on to that's guiding you back and forth, even in a regular day, even just doing your everyday chores, what is that cord that's there? I was sharing this poem a few weeks ago with some students, and we spent a long time talking about the very last line. You don't ever let go of the thread. And there was a discussion between the students as to whether or not this last line was an imperative. You, don't let go. Or whether it was a description. This is the kind of person you are. You're the kind of person who doesn't let go of the thread. And how much more invitational that was to see ourselves as people who know what to hold on to. And that's a hard people to be. And I loved their conversation around that. Was it instructional or invitational? we aren't really set up to have a conversation. If you would like to make a little note, if you want to, those of you who are in the room, if you would like to share a thought about your threads, please wave your hands. I'll read the chat later if there's a chat, if those of you online are participating. But it's good to think about those threads, to hold fast to those that shall endure. The second poem takes us in a little bit different direction. My mom and I have been having a conversation about our appreciation for the poet Sheena Pugh. She has a number of wonderful offerings. And I offer you this poem. What if this road? What if this road that has held no surprises these many years decided not to go home after all? What if it could turn left or right with no more ado than a kite tail? What if its tarry skin were like a long, supple bolt of cloth that is shaken and rolled out and takes a new shape from the contours beneath? And if it chose to lay itself down in a new way, around a blind corner, across hills you must climb without knowing what's on the other side, who would not hanker to be going at all risks? Who wants to know a story's end or where a road will go? So we continue with holding on to a little bit of this kind of fabric and thread imagery, the bolt of cloth that you can shake out. And if I shake it out over this podium, it looks one way. And if I shake it off over that chair, it looks another. But it takes the contours of the land. I will admit that this poem is also a challenging one for me. I'm not sure that I'd always be hankering to see where the road might go. I'm not sure that I would take delight in a road that chose on its own, the road making its own decision, not to go home when I expected it to take me home. There is a strong part of me that would resist that and would be offended by that, would not like that at all. But again, this kind of hearing in this, much like in Stafford's poem, perhaps some invitation. What would it be like if the road chose? So often we think that we're the ones making all the decisions. And we do. We have a lot of choice. Those of us who are here, those of us who are online, we've made decisions already. So many decisions about the day that we were in charge of. But often circumstances change, and we were not in charge. We were not consulted. We were not brought in to think it through and make a new plan. It just changed on us. The road decided, the world decided. However you think about our place in terms of like, do I have full autonomy over my life, or am I sometimes swayed by what's going on around me? We're all some of both. So the playfulness here holds this idea that the road might not take you home today. That's frightening. She also offers us this idea that it might be really thrilling, that it might be an opportunity, that we might want to go. We might really thrill at the idea that we don't know the story's end, that we don't know everything after all, that we aren't quite sure, and that could be, I don't know, maybe freeing, maybe opening us up in some new way. That if we already knew the story's end, what's the point of the story? But if we could entertain with some curiosity, some wonder about, well, what might happen next? It might be lovely. It might be better than our expectations. It might be different in a way that we could not have even imagined. So I wonder, as you see the questions here, about your hankering. Would you hanker to be going somewhere new and unknown? Would you resist? Would Would you try to get your car back on the road you planning on driving? Or would you follow where the new path was going? And how would you feel about that? I think on any given day, you might feel different ways about that. If you are looking down a road that's unexpected, could you hear, as she offers, some sense of wonder and curiosity? That yes, there may be hills to climb, but that you might discover something on the other side that was quite wonderful. So now the thread that continues as we move away from fabric imagery, but we stay now, Sheena has given us the road, so now we're going to talk about the road and some travel. I am in, let's see, September. I'm in the 9th month of the year. I'm in the middle of a project. I decided at the beginning of the year that I was going to walk 500 miles. I can't go walk the Camino in Spain because COVID, and also because I can't go to Spain right now for lots of reasons, not just COVID. But that I would go on what I'm calling my own local pilgrimage. And that I would just walk 500 miles in my neighborhood. And I've been doing really well. I will say that August I did not meet my mileage marker, but I'm back at it in September. But I've been thinking all year, it's kind of all started with this, not with this poem, but with the idea of Solvitur ambulando, which Billy Collins is going to play with, but it's an old Latin idea that it is solved by walking. And that you can solve a lot of problems by going for a walk. So he offers us a playful interpretation of this idea. Solvitur ambulando. I'm probably butchering the Latin, and my Latin teacher somewhere is like, oh my gosh. Translation, it is solved by walking. I sometimes wonder about the thoughtful Roman who came up with the notion that any problem can be solved by walking. Maybe his worries were minor enough to be banished by a little amble along the paths of his gardens, or if he faced a tough one, whether to invite Lavinia or Pomponia to the feast, walking to the Colosseum would show him the one to pick. The maxim makes it sound so simple. Go for a walk until you find the solution. Then walk back home with a clear head. No problem, as they used to say in ancient Rome. But one night, a sticky one might take you for a walk past the limits of a city, beyond the street lights of its suburbs, and there you are, knocking on the door of a farmer who keeps you company on the porch until your wife comes to fetch you and drive you and your problem back home. Your problem taking up most of the back seat and staring at your wife in the rearview mirror. And what about the mathematician who tried to figure out some devilish mind crusher like Goldbach's conjecture, and taking the Latin to heart walked to the very bottom of Patagonia? There he stood on a promontory, so the locals like to tell you, staring beyond the end of the hemisphere, with nothing but the cries of seabirds, waves exploding on the rocks, clouds rushing down the sky, and him having figured the whole thing out. When I need to remember of poetry's lightheartedness, Billy Collins is my go-to. His poems, as you can see, are funny and entertaining. If you ever have the opportunity to watch him online or some way, it's almost like a stand-up comic show. He's just funny, and he's funny in his delivery. And often, though, underneath the kind of, the lightheartedness of no problem, as they used to say in ancient Rome, and the kind of tongue-in-cheekness of all of that, is this question of how do we figure it out? How do we figure out what the thread is? How do we figure out where to go, which path to follow? There are so many earthly things to be anxious about. So what do we do when we need to figure it all out? When we have a real devilish mind crusher, a sticky one? I wonder what you do. We all have our ways of figuring out what to hold on to, what to let go of. Some of us are list makers, some of us are conversational partners with people that we trust. Some of us are people who go for walks. As somebody who's trying to do a lot more walking, I will tell you that no one walk has solved it all for me, but I can commend the practice that over time, there is something to it. It does sound so simple to go for a walk until you find a solution, but we need methods, we need ways, we need to figure out how to discern things in this world, who to turn to, how to listen, how to be quiet. And some of the worries are quick and easy and easily solved, banished by a little anvil, as he says. Some of them we feel like we might need to go all the way to Patagonia to solve. But I think it's worth thinking about, that sometimes we just make decisions. We just keep going. We just say we'll figure that out, and we don't spend the time to sit and figure it out, or not to sit and figure it out, however. And then the decision gets made without our attention, without our intention. So for you to give some thought to, and for me to give some thought to, when I need to figure the whole thing out, where do I go? What do I do? Who am I with? All right, if you're following along in the packet, you may have turned the page and seen that this A is long and B doesn't look a whole lot like a poem. This is a poem story by a poet named Naomi Shihab Nye, and it's called Gate A4. Laura and I were talking about it earlier. We both have this story poem has been with us for quite a while. The reason I offer it to you today is because I think it does fit with our figuring out what to hold on to idea. The other thing is that I have to give a shout out to Jeannie Johnson, wife of former Bishop Johnson. She posted this poem not too long ago on social media. Those of you who are friends with her on Facebook may have seen it. And I was glad for it because I hadn't thought about this poem in a long, long time. And it reminded me, not just of the poem, but that good things can be shared on social media. Poetry can be shared. It's not all doom and gloom and troll factories and all of that. And it also spoke to me in a way that, like, this is a timely offering that someone else offered that I'm going to take advantage of. But that the poetry that's out there that you stumble upon, you know, in your daily commute because you heard a line of something or something from your English class floated up in your head, or someone said, hey, read this. The poetry that floats up like that from the world around us, I think, can be important to pay attention to. Much like song lyrics that get stuck in your head, or the plot point of a story or something like that, that sometimes there's something in there that you need to hear, that I need to hear. So from the wilds of social media comes this poem by Naomi Shihab Nye called Gate A4. Wandering around the Albuquerque airport terminal, after learning my flight had been delayed 4 hours, I heard an announcement. If anyone in the vicinity of Gate A4 understands any Arabic, please come to the gate immediately. Well, one pauses these days. Gate A4 was my own gate. I went there. An older woman in full traditional Palestinian embroidered dress, just like my grandma wore, was crumpled to the floor, wailing. "Help," said the flight agent. "Talk to her. What is her problem? We told her the flight was going to be late, and she did this." I stooped to put my arm around the woman and spoke haltingly. "Shudawa, Shubidok, Habibiti, Stani Shwe, Ming Fadik, Shubit Siwi." The minute she heard any words she knew, however poorly used, she stopped crying. She thought the flight had been canceled entirely. She needed to be in El Paso for major medical treatment the next day. I said, "No, we're fine. You'll get there, just later. Who is picking you up? Let's call him." We called her son. I spoke with him in English. I told him I would stay with his mother till we got on the plane and ride next to her. She talked to him. Then we called her other sons just for the fun of it. Then we called my dad, and he and she spoke for a while in Arabic and found out, of course, they had 10 shared friends. Then I thought, just for the heck of it, why not call some Palestinian poets I know and let them chat with her? This all took up 2 hours. She was laughing a lot by then, telling of her life, patting my knee, answering questions. She had pulled a sack of homemade mamul cookies, little powdered sugar crumbly mounds stuffed with dates and nuts, from her bag, and was offering them to all the women at the gate. To my amazement, not a single woman declined one. It was like a sacrament. The traveler from Argentina, the mom from California, the lovely woman from Laredo, we were all covered with the same powdered sugar and smiling. There is no better cookie. And then the airline broke out free apple juice from huge coolers, and 2 little girls from our flight ran around serving it, and they were covered with powdered sugar too. And I noticed my new best friend, by now we were holding hands, had a potted plant poking out of her bag, some medicinal thing with green furry leaves. Such an old country tradition. Always carry a plant. Always stay rooted somewhere. And I looked around that gate of late and weary ones, and I thought, this is the world I want to live in. The shared world. Not a single person at that gate, once the crying and confusion had stopped, seemed apprehensive about any other person. They took the cookies. I wanted to hug all those women, all those other women too. This can still happen anywhere. Not everything is lost. So there's a lot to this story poem. And if it helps you to know, it was written in about 2008. So after 9/11 and all of the airport changes and all of that, and certainly this, all of these prejudices and ideas about those who speak Arabic. As you learn through the story, Shihab Nye is herself of Palestinian descent. She lives in Texas. She is crossing through these borders and these communities all the time. The same thing happened to me this morning that happened to me yesterday when I was practicing reading it, beyond the fact that I appreciate the attempt at Arabic and having it transliterated. I know I still butchered it. But the line that gets me, when she offers them the cookies to the other women, and she says, to my amazement, not a single woman declined one. And there's something about that ability to receive gifts, ability to trust the people around you, that clearly am in a place of hunger, no pun intended for that. But as she concludes her poem and she says, "This is the world I want to live in." This world is unsteady. This world is confusing. This world is the world of flight delays. This world is the world of bigotry. This world is the world of confusion and frustration. She wants to live in that world because it is also the world of connection and trust and crossing boundaries and holding hands and sharing cookies. And they're all at the same time. It's the same world. It's not, I want to live in the world where everything goes smoothly and everyone is nice. Sometimes these things go smoothly and sometimes they don't. Sometimes people are nice and sometimes they're not. It's all a mix. Finding our way in the middle of that and then being able to look around and say and name this right here in the middle, this bit, the shared world, where we're connected, where I'm connected, where the thread that I'm following is there, where maybe there's a thread between you and me. We don't get to pick steady or unsteady. We don't get to pick all the flights are on time. We don't get to pick I have no struggles to figure out and I know where the road is going and it's going to take me home. We don't always get that. We actually rarely get that. And that in the middle of all of that, we can still locate the steady point. We can still figure out what to hold fast to, what is enduring. This is the world that I want to live in. And again, I wonder what kind of world you feel like you're living in. Is it the mixed bag? Is it pretty good right now? Is it falling apart right now? Is it leaning in one direction or the other? And in the midst of all of that, can you name it? Can you see it? Do you have a time in your life where you're like, you know what? Years ago, I was in this place and this thing happened and that's it. The airport terminal, or the classroom, or your apartment, or the grocery store, or the trip wherever you went. Did you get a glimpse of it? And then can you still carry that with you and use that as a thread to say, this is the world that I want to live in? Because that can happen anywhere. And not everything is lost. Even while things are passing away, not everything is passing away. Not everything is lost. Not everything is unsteady and shaky and tenuous. And even in the midst of all of that, can you see it? Can you find the cord that gets you to the barn and back again? I don't know how you answer the questions today. I don't know that I could answer all of them out loud for you. But it's worth considering because it's tricky out there. And it's tricky in here. It is super easy to be anxious about all these things, earthly and otherwise, and hard to remember how to love things heavenly. And we are placed among things that are passing away, things that are fragile. But there is an invitation. Not an instruction, not a reprimand, but an invitation to hold fast to those things that shall endure. To figure out what they are for you, to grab on. And while you hold it, you can't get lost. Thank you.